If we can have your attention, we'll get started here. Welcome to our workshop December 20th meeting. And we'll start off here with responses to the City Council. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy, council members. You had two questions, relatively short answers for both. The first question had to do with the Municipal Service Center update. And you were asking how economic development would be pursued in this area in conjunction with the Municipal Service Center project. And the answer is that there's a long narrative there, but essentially the answer is that we've done planning in this area. And regardless of what decision is ultimately made about the Municipal Service Center, we would plan to pursue economic development options in that area. Remember, with Southeast Connector generally in that vicinity, it's an area that's ripe for redevelopment, and so the areas along Southeast 14th, along Southeast Connector, east and west through that area are appropriate areas for us to target our activity. You have on the agenda this evening one of the first purchases of land down there, so all of that would be appropriate given our long-term objectives for that area in terms of economic development, regardless of what we do with Municipal Service Center, although our intentions are to pursue the Service Center concept as Council has directed. The second question had to do with a topographic map of the flooding characteristics of the site that we propose for Municipal Service Center. We have or will provide a copy of that to the mayor. He was the one that asked for it, and there are copies available for each of you. If you'd like to have it, just let me know. Mayor Pro Tem, that's all we have.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have that. I'd like to have a copy of the map anyhow, and I think the others would too. So if we could share it with everybody, it'd be great. Yeah. Okay. Next on our agenda, bicycle master plan. I see Mr. Tripp hitting to the microphone.
Good morning. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, Mahaffey, members of the City Council, Don Tripp, Park and Recreation Director. This will be the first time you've seen this plan. It's a collaborative effort of several city departments. It will be presented today by Richard Brown, who's been our city parks planner that has been in charge of trail system planning and management and development for the last several years, and Gary Fox, the city's traffic engineer. The plan seeks to build upon the city's extensive trail network by integrating the bicycle into the city's transportation system. Just one final note from me. At your seats you have a folder looking like this. There are several maps with this presentation that are a little bit difficult to read in the PowerPoint format, so you want to take a look at those. And with that, I'll turn it over to Richard Brown.
Mayor Pro Tem Mahaffey, members of the council, Richard Brown, Park Planner 3. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk about a proposed bicycle and trail master plan for the city of Des Moines. This plan seeks to build upon the city's extensive trail network and to integrate the bicycle into the city's transportation system. As I get started, I want to provide you a brief overview of what we're going to discuss today. In the past few years, a series of council actions and policies has created a paradigm shift in how the bicycle is treated and accommodated in the city of Des Moines. This proposed plan builds upon the city's extensive trail network and seeks to integrate the bicycle into its transportation system. The focus of the plan is not the trail system, but rather the on-street bicycle facilities that connect the community to our trail system. And finally, we'll look at, are we headed in the right direction, and what are the next steps and where we go from here. As I just indicated, the city's extensive trail system is how we got to where we are today. The roots of the Des Moines Trail System date back to 1973 with the construction of the Bill Riley Trail. The last 20 years has seen a boom in the number of trails constructed and connected together. And since those early beginnings in 1973, the trail system has grown from 1.7 miles to over 41 miles today. This map shows trail development in Des Moines up to 1990. The Bill Riley is the purple on the left, and the Neil Smith and Pat Dorian are the ones on the right. This map shows how the trail system in Des Moines and the surrounding communities has exploded as it was in early 2010. Trails are clearly important to the residents of Des Moines. A 2007 recreational needs assessment and Satisfaction Survey revealed that trails were the #1 park facility for the citizens of Des Moines. I'll refer you to a handout in the folder that shows where trails ranked among the priorities of citizens when they did this survey. Over the past few years, previous council actions and policy have integrated and accommodated the bicycle into the city of Des Moines. Of the council goals adopted in 2006, this proposed bicycle and trail master plan most directly relates to the city's sustainable green community goal that includes a directive that Des Moines will offer safe, reliable, and convenient transportation alternatives that reduce the reliance on automobiles and parking facilities. The Complete Streets policy is nearly 2 years old and has had a huge impact on roads in the city of Des Moines. Several roads now have bicycle facilities, including Ingersoll Avenue, the newly rebuilt Indianola Avenue, the brand new open Southeast Connector, Urbandale Avenue, the newly rebuilt Southeast 6th Street, and next spring, 45th Street south of Grand Avenue will have bicycle facilities. This represents over 6 miles of Des Moines streets that now have bicycle facilities on them. This proposed bicycle master plan has many potential benefits to the city of Des Moines. Among these benefits, more bike riders mean less air pollution and carbon released into our atmosphere. People that ride bikes are generally healthier, and on-street bicycle facilities can connect people to places that our trails cannot. Creating this plan has been a nearly 18-month process that kicked off in July of 2009. The city hired Alta Planning and Design out of Portland, Oregon to conduct the plan. This started with a series of public input sessions at the main library that included well over 100 people. Working from that input, an advisory committee comprised of a group of citizens, city staff, and other interested organizations worked with the consultant to draft the proposed plan. The heart of this plan is a series of goals that are summarized here. They focus on several overarching themes, including health and wellness, increased bicycle use, economic development, environmental benefits, and bicyclist safety. One of the major aspects of the plan is a proposed bicycle and trail on-street bicycle network. You'll find a copy of this map in your folder. It's a little bit hard to read up above here. But this proposed network includes a series of facilities, some of which are new to Des Moines and others that are currently widely used around the city. The combination of existing and proposed bicycle and trail facilities seeks to integrate the bicycle into the city's transportation network. Gary Fox will now take a few minutes to describe each of these new facilities.
Good morning.
Good morning, Gary.
I know it's hard to read this map, but the real image I want you to take from this is think back on the map that Richard had about where our trails are. And there were a lot of them in the downtown and out to the west and northwest. There's a few in the northeast corner, and that's about it. They're not connected together. There's more gaps than there are trails. It's a great system, but there are many, many gaps. If you just look at this map without getting into the details of it, you see that this is represented all over the city. There's connections here that will get you from all parts of town, connect to those trails that we have, and then include some key additional links to the trails. So how do we do that? Again, as Richard said, this is primarily on street, so in some cases it's pretty simple. Restripe the streets there, or even just put up signs designated so you can do some wayfinding and find your way on it. These are the types of techniques that are used to create the on-street bicycles, bike facilities. Of course, the first one is the off-street trails. That's what we have, and there's some expansion of that to bring in the key connections. But bike lanes, bike boulevard, that's a relatively new term, and we'll talk about that a little bit, what those are. Cycle tracks, that's also very new. I don't know that there are any in the state of Iowa directly, but shared lane markings, shoulder bikeways, the simple signed bike routes. And then as you start to bring these things in, you need some additional amenities, bicycle parking and other amenities, bike showers, just a whole range of things start getting added to the list to really make it work.
Bike showers?
Well, for those that commute to work, ride to work, and then you're sweaty, so you need to stop a place, park your bike, take a shower, and go to work. Some of them have them in the workplace, and we actually need some public ones. So just those are the extra amenities that will kind of go along and fit in with as people really start using the bike as a primary form of transportation. Again, the off-street trails, typically they're 8 to 12 feet wide. It's paved, ADA compliant, all of that stuff. And generally, they follow along the rivers, creeks, and greenways. And going back again to that image of we've got a lot of them, but we've got a lot of gaps, the kind of a burning image in my mind as to why we need to do this is for a lot of folks to use that great trail system we have. They load their bike on their car, drive to a trailhead, take their bike off, and then get a ride on the wonderful facilities that we have. Seems to me that makes a lot more sense. Just get your bike out of the garage or whatever and get on it. You can ride on your local street and then pick up a collector bike boulevard or bike lanes or something and then ride and eventually get to that trail and do the rest of your ride. Or maybe you're going to school or to work or shopping. So again, the bicycle lanes, typically it's dedicated, marked on the pavement. The image there is a nice picture that we've taken there on Ingersoll. It shows traffic, there's trucks, there's parking, the bike lanes with a bike using it. It really just carves out in the roadway, designates the places where the traffic's supposed to be and where the bikes are supposed to be, makes it work pretty well. As Richard said, we have some existing locations here, Southeast Connector, Indianola, East 6th. Those are new construction, relatively easy to build into. Takes a little bit extra money to build the extra width, but relatively easy. Cottage Grove was a real simple restriping of that. Ingersoll's a little more complicated and controversial with the additional things of parking and buses on there, but it can be fit onto those kind of facilities. Urbandale was a little bit challenging to work with residential parking, but I think we came to a good solution there. East Walnut, we have them, and there hasn't been a lot of discussion about those. So we're off to a pretty good start, but we got a long ways to go to expand that. The bike boulevards is kind of a new treatment that really bikes have shared the street with vehicles for a long time on bike routes, but this really picks something and takes a street that serves as a good bike collector and then enhances it, puts some traffic calming things in to help slow down traffic, less emphasis on the vehicular traffic and more emphasis on the bicycle traffic. One of the main things that may need to happen with a bike boulevard is as you get to crossing major streets, collector and arterial streets, there may need to be some additional facilities built or bike detectors, just a variety of things to help the bikes easily get across the really busy and heavy streets. Just a variety of things there, and there's no one size fits all. They've got to be really designed particularly to the circumstances of the individual road. Cycle tracks, it's really, when you see this and it's kind of colored pavement, it's in the sidewalk, that's one type of cycle track. It doesn't really have to be that. I think essentially the key element that differentiates that from a bike lane is it puts the bicycle lane on the other side of the parked vehicles. Like on Ingersoll, the parked vehicles are right by the curb where the businesses are. The bike lane is between the parked vehicles and the moving traffic. On a cycle track, under certain circumstances, kind of makes sense if you can take a lane of traffic out, have the parked cars adjacent to the moving traffic, and then there's a bike lane between the pedestrians and the parked cars. A little bit safer for the bicycles. Don't know that there's a lot of places that this will apply, but again, that's one of the techniques, and there may be some areas where that's a better solution than simply putting the bike lane on the traffic side of parked vehicles. Shared lane markings, a fairly simple treatment, pretty similar to bike lanes, but there are some real specific standards that you have to meet to designate bike lanes on the street. Sometimes if you have a little bit less width than that, rather than just give up and not be able to do anything, you can mark, it's called sharrows, is this bike symbol with the chevron arrows in the front of it. It's a sharrow indicating that the bikes and the vehicle share the road. This is kind of the area that bikes should ride, pretty much right over the symbol and through the sharrows. It positions them far enough away from parked vehicles that they're a little bit out of the door opening zone. And rather than wander all over the street in front of traffic, it's, again, sort of designates the preferred area for the bicyclists so the bikes and the motorists can share the road a little bit easier. Shoulder bikeway, it's really kind of the rural version of bike lanes, pretty simple to do. We don't have a lot of applications for that in an urban area, but where there's the open ditch drainage, a 4-foot paved shoulder is adequate width then for bicycles to ride on an area that's outside the normal traffic lanes. We do have a couple of them with paved shoulders. They're not designated bikeways yet, but they're proposed to be incorporated into the plan on East Army Post Road and then Broadway Avenue. And again, under certain circumstances, that may be a real simple and cost-effective solution to put the bike facility on the roadway. The simplest and lowest level of treatment is assigned bike routes. We've had assigned bike routes around the city for longer than I've been with the city, so I know that's quite a long time, more than 30 years. They've not had a lot of attention. It's really simple and basic, probably some signs missing. The thing that the master plan talks about adding on is some additional wayfinding information. How far is it to some destinations? Where are destinations along this, other than this just being a bike route, and followed along some additional information as shown in the example to Waterfront Park or Community College, those kind of things. So very helpful. We have some of the routes that are currently bike routes are appropriate that way. That signing just needs to be improved and add some of this to it. So that's a very simple and low cost way to have the bikes and the vehicles share the street. And again, as we mentioned, bicycle parking, as you start to have this, and particularly as people use it for shopping and commuter trips to work, you need a place to park your bicycle when you get there. And both short and long term. If somebody's riding to work, they need a place to park their bike all day long. And if they're just going short time to shopping a little bit, they may need to park for 15 or 20 minutes. Location style is really a key to success. There's a variety of things. You can attach it to posts, different things. Some people have very expensive bikes and they really want to put it in a secure locker, protected from the elements, protected from somebody vandalizing or stealing their bike. So you need a variety of things. In the downtown area now, we've installed about 600 racks, not just in the downtown, a lot of them in the downtown, but also starting to spread out. Ingersoll, one of the follow-ups is we got the bike lanes on there and the acceptance of bicyclists out there. Some of the businesses were asking for some help in getting some bike parking. Doesn't need to be a whole lot of it, but they recognize they've got bicycle customers, and so they want that amenity, have a few bike parking spaces right by their business. I think that one was, is that the last one, Richard? Yep. Now back to Richard.
Thanks, Gary. As you see, with so many different bicycle facilities proposed for areas across the city, the advisory committee felt it was important to highlight 3 priority projects for implementation that could have the biggest impact coming out of the gate for implementation of this plan. I will briefly describe each of these 3 projects to you, and I will refer you to maps in your folder that has a little bit more detail on each one of them. The first priority is a series of proposed bicycle facilities in downtown Des Moines. Some of these facilities include bike lanes, shared lane markings, also known as the Sharrow, cycle tracks, and bicycle boulevards. This combination of the on-street bicycle facilities seeks to connect the downtown to the existing trail and bicycle facilities on the edge of downtown. Currently, most of our trails connect to the edges of downtown, but do not penetrate into the downtown area. It also proposes to connect these on-street bicycle facilities to the new transit hub being constructed for DART buses. The second priority facility is a bicycle boulevard proposed for Southwest 14th Street on Des Moines' southwest side. Southwest 14th Street parallels both Fleur and Southwest 9th Street, but only carries a fraction of the traffic that these 2 arterial streets do. It makes it a perfect and ideal candidate for a bicycle boulevard. This boulevard would connect Grays Lake Park to the Blank Park Zoo, Fort Des Moines, the Super Block. It will also provide connections to the newly annexed areas of South Des Moines, as well as all the residential and commercial neighborhoods and schools along this corridor. The final proposed priority project is called the Northeast Bicycle Connector. Currently, there is not a good connection from the very popular Gailey-Wilson Trail on the city's northeast side to downtown Des Moines. The heart of this proposal is a series of bike lanes on Hubble Avenue from East 18th Street to East 33rd Street. Preliminary analysis has indicated that traffic counts on this stretch of road could handle a change from 4 lanes to 3 lanes, which would be needed to allow the bike lanes. Further study and public input would be needed before bringing any proposal like this forward for approval. Finally, I'd like to wrap up where we've been and where we go from here. The proposed next steps for this plan include the following you see here. It'll be important to get the public's input on the proposed plan before finalizing it and bringing it through the public approval process. As I stated earlier, this plan seeks to build on the city's extensive trail network and integrate the bicycle into the city's transportation network. Thank you for allowing me to spend a little bit of time introducing this proposed plan, and we'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Go ahead, Christine.
The Southwest 14th component that you're talking about, Richard,
Mm-hmm.
can I have an update? Do we know, maybe I need to talk with Don about this. What do we need to be doing on that to get that forward? Because there have been some contacts made on that.
Yes, Councilmember Hensley, this connection actually would go all the way to Grace Lake. It's a project that would connect an off-street facility along Thomas Beck Road, Pomerantz Services, and through the railroad marshaling yards. We are working with the neighborhood to fundraise for that connection. As you know, we've talked with the neighborhood about this connection and either coming up Druid Hill Drive or Cassidy Drive. So really the approval of this plan in this particular step in the process is important, because the next step for us is to get out to the neighborhood and talk about the design of Southwest 14th Street.
Okay.
Don, what's the timetable from the Gailey-Wilson to Altoona?
I'll let
We
Richard.
talked about that.
Gailey-Wilson, Altoona. What do you know about that?
Currently, the Gailey-Wilson Trail does connect through Pleasant Hill to Altoona. There's another segment that Polk County Conservation is working on to connect up to the city of Ankeny and over to the Neil Smith Trail. I believe they have all the property acquired for that section up to Ankeny, but are just waiting on the remaining funds to start construction.
I misspoke, I meant Ankeny, but
Yeah.
I knew it was on to Altoona already.
Yeah, I know they have been able to acquire all that property, but are just waiting on some final funding.
Okay, so that's in pretty near future, you think?
We can find out the exact answer, but I would guess in the next year or two is probably appropriate.
Richard, that proposed section that runs along the south edge of Waveland Golf Course, where are we at with that?
Currently, we do not have any money to fund the section of trail. What Councilman Moore is referring to is a section of trail that would parallel I-235 as well as the south end of Waveland Golf Course. We just completed a section that goes north along there, along the west side of the cemetery. Due to the complexity of design, we are estimating it to be probably in the neighborhood of $1 million, so we're looking for grants and ability to design that and get it constructed. I'd estimate it's at least 5 years out at this time.
Thank you.
Don, do you feel we're getting our fair share of MPO dollars for trails?
Councilmember Mahaffey, we'll take more,
Well, yeah, I guess we always will.
but you've done a great job through the MPO and our representatives there to direct money towards trails in central Iowa, and in Des Moines I think we've done pretty well. When I checked a couple years ago, our trail construction since the early 1990s had been somewhere in the range of about 40% funded outside Des Moines, either federal or state grants.
How will, MAC is discussing a bike ordinance as well, and will that be part of are we going to bring that forward and have it part of this master plan?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm familiar with that.
Have you been, who's from the city has been involved in the discussions on that?
Well, I haven't been directly, but I've seen some of the things they're doing, and I think it's important, especially as you start to do some things on the street, because the different communities have slightly different bicycle laws. I know in some places it's actually illegal to ride on the sidewalk. Des Moines, it's legal to ride on the sidewalk, but there are certain restrictions. So as you start to get more facilities, and people in the metropolitan area don't particularly care when they cross some kind of a political boundary, they just are going on a ride from here to there. They may live in one community in the park they're going to or whatever's in a different one, or they're going on a longer ride through several. So it'd really be helpful if there's consistent ordinances. So that's what that effort is about, is to look at the different ordinances. They've compared all of them and seen what's in common and what some of the differences are. It looks to me like the differences are pretty minor, and it wouldn't be a huge effort to get that and have pretty consistent bike ordinances across the whole metro area. Just make it easier so that, if you're riding your bike, you're trying to be a good citizen, and all of a sudden you go from one community, you're illegal, you go to the next community, you do the same thing, and suddenly it's against their ordinances. That's not a good situation. So, I think that's coming along. And
it is, and it was presented at MAC last week, so I guess my question is, can we have that before this group so that we can incorporate that? Because we were trying to get it in place to eliminate the problems of going from one jurisdiction to another where there are different rules.
I don't know quite where they are with all the communities, if everybody's agreed to the changes that would need to be made and
We're at the point where
standards
this
they're
is
going to
the
adopt.
template
But,
and.
but I don't know if they've really brought it up exactly who's going to change what. But they've done a lot of work on it. It shouldn't take too much more to get it to the finish line.
Just a final, you're sort of in mid-process here. You've got a draft plan. You're going to go out and get more public input. You go through a review process with boards and commissions before it gets back to this table. But I would encourage council members, if you have comments or suggestions, the suggestion that Christine just made is a great one. And now is the time, if you have those kind of thoughts, and it doesn't have to be today, but any time in the next, I suppose, few months,
Right.
Correct?
Probably about 90 days. There's a very comprehensive plan here. We can get you a copy of that. It talks to the specific locations of some of these facilities. And the next step for us will be to get you a copy of this so you can review this. I'd also like to recognize we had a citizen member here today of the committee. Carl Voss is here. Thanks, Carl, for coming. And Park Board President Joe Galloway, the Park Board, has also been involved. And I want to thank the rest of the city departments, including Economic Development and Public Works and Engineering, for their support on this. So we'll be back with you probably in the next 90 days with a policy recommendation.
I'm glad to see DART continue to add more bicycle racks to their variety of vehicles so that they can help out in using of the bicycles and that.
Right.
The usage of those bike racks has been amazing.
It has been, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, very nice.
Manager, should we go on with the fiscal year 09-10 audit report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council members, I'm going to have Alan McKinley do the introductions here.
Mayor, members of council, Alan McKinley, Finance Director. Typically, we do a workshop presentation to you on the comprehensive annual financial report in January. This year, we were able to have this presented to you today in December. We have a representative from McGladrey, our outside audit firm, Sherry Myers. She'll be coming to make a brief presentation to you. The CAFR document will be out to you very shortly with a council action scheduled in January. And just as a reminder to you, the audit process is not something that simply happens within the finance department, but it really is obviously a citywide review of our financial actions, and with millions of dollars of grant funds that are flowing through various departments, primarily airport engineering, community development, and police department. The audit process touches all of those people in all of those departments, and without their assistance, we couldn't complete an audit that we're able to complete. And with that, I'll introduce to you Sherry Myers from McGladrey. You're used to seeing probably Mia Frommelt. They've had reorganizations and reassignments, and so this year we have Sherry with us.
Chair of Council, thank you for letting me be here today. As you know, I really want to echo what Alan said. Everyone across the entire city is very responsive to us. This is on top of their normal workday, of course, when we're in digging out, having them dig out support for transactions and responding to questions, and everybody is extremely responsive. There's a communication that we issue to the council, and I'm just going to kind of walk through the highlights of that. Probably the most important, I guess, if I'm a council member, is what kind of opinion did we get? There is a clean and unqualified opinion on the financial statements. We do believe that the financial statements are materially accurate. That's probably the most important. The one page actually, well, there's a few pages, but in the financial section, the one page that's ours is that opinion. The rest they are the city's financial statements. And Alan and his group really do take ownership of that process of drafting those financial statements, of questioning how things should look, how transactions should be recorded. So I'm very happy to report that to you as well. Whoops, got too many papers here. There were a few new accounting standards applicable to the city this year. They did not have any impact on the city. There's also another statement that will be effective in the future. You'll see that in the footnotes, and again, the city is evaluating the impact of that. There were no significant or unusual transactions, no transactions which are kind of in that gray area that we had discussions with management about, that they're trying to, record one way or another. No audit adjustments to the trial balance presented to us. No disagreements with management. We're not aware of any consultations management may have had with other accounting firms to, receive a preferential accounting treatment. That we have open discussions with management and are comfortable that we had full responses to our inquiries. I urge you as a council to, when you do get that CAFR, read through Note 1, understand those accounting policies and how things are accounted for. The other thing that's key, when we do an audit, we really look at what are the risk areas, and then we look at those areas. One area of risk, obviously, is revenue recognition. The second is significant estimates. And of the significant estimates to the city, some of those are the allowance for doubtful accounts, post-employment benefits, depreciation, what are the lives that have been assigned. In all those cases, we obtained an understanding of management's process, and we concurred not only with that process, but with the estimates as well. Very clean compliance report. The compliance report is required because of the level of federal funding. As decentralized as the city can be, especially with federal funding, that's kind of a risk area as well, and we had good results there as well. Any questions?
Question on how did you go about dealing with the amount of cash that we have within the city system? What type of procedures are used? Do you go in and do, I guess if you could just describe that.
Well, we will confirm cash with the banks or whoever they happen to be held with. We'll also test those reconciliations from the bank to the book to see that if there's outstanding checks, that they're all recorded or recognized in that reconciliation, that if there's transfers between accounts that are significant, we're looking at those as well. And we obtain an understanding of the controls over cash processes, and we'll do a walkthrough of those as well.
So within the city structure, do we have cash in a lot of different areas, or is it just more centralized?
For the most part, it's centralized. The material amounts of cash, is obviously some immaterial amounts, but most of the cash is centralized and really in a pooled basis, which is actually what I would, from an accounting standpoint, what you like to see. You have better control.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have anything else?
Mr. Mayor, can I just make a couple comments?
Please.
First, I'm very pleased with this result. A great testament to not only the finance department, but all of our departments that keep the accounts and make sure that we pay things and spend money appropriately. The other observation, and Sherry, perhaps you'd like to add to this, this year and the years in the recent past, we've received a lot of federal dollars and state dollars, stimulus dollars, or other grant funds. It has been quite a challenge for the organization to keep track of that and spend it appropriately. In fact, there were times when the federal dollars would come, yet the regulations and requirements that were part of those dollars were not always so easy for us to get. And there's always some apprehension, at least on my part, about how we're able to manage through all that. And I'm really pleased at this result, because I think you've essentially confirmed the fact that we've done well in spending those dollars. Anything you'd like to add about that? Because for me, that's one of the big issues that we've had the last year or two on finances.
I agree with what you say, and as I said, when you have more federal dollars, it does raise the risk. It's very rare to not have issues because you've got, if you look at the city's obviously moving parts, you've got people transitioning in and out of roles, which and those individuals may or may not understand those requirements. I have in the past counseled clients, in some cases, not to take federal funds because the strings are too large, but certainly you need to continue, and I had a discussion with Mayor County about that as well. You need to continue to look for those funds, but you need to be cognizant of what those requirements are, and I think the city does a good job of saying, what are those requirements, and what do we need to do up front to be ready to comply with those requirements. Sometimes that results in a bit of a delay in spending those funds, but I think clearly came out in good results. And we did have an additional, what we call major program, which means we needed to test additional programs this year, primarily because of those ERA funds coming in. They're presumed to be high risk, and so you really need to, if you've got significant ERA dollars coming in, spend time looking at those.
Was there an opportunity for you to have a discussion with the mayor without staff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Which is very important. So
yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's great. We had an unqualified opinion and no journal entries with all those due to, due from accounts between operating accounts. It's great to have that report.
Absolutely. And kudos to Alan and his team. So good.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to our long-term financial outlook.
Mr. Mayor, council members, Alan's going to handle this. We have, as some of you know, with the legislative meeting we had last week, there was discussion about preparation made for an overview of our long-term financial situation. But we thought the information that was gathered for that was so pertinent that we wanted to review it and share it with council here today as well, and just make you aware of some of the issues that we're looking at going forward, particularly for the next year, but clearly beyond that. So with that, Alan, please.
Thank you, Rick. Just as a side comment, our audit relationship with our auditor is an ongoing relationship. So throughout the year, as transactions or grants come up that we need some advice on how to handle or what would be the best treatment, we can certainly go to them and ask for their opinion and for us to move forward. And they like to be aware of what's going on with the city financially so that they don't come in and have to be brought up to speed. So a comment that Sherry just made to me is, I'm going to stay and listen to this about our long-term financial outlook. Gives her a better idea of what's going on with the city of Des Moines on a long-term basis. So this is a good example of their interest in wanting to be involved in understanding what our financial position is, and especially looking forward as well. As Rick mentioned, last week we staff and some of the council met with some of the local legislators in anticipation of this year's session, and to just provide them a little bit of information about the city of Des Moines' long-term financial outlook. Just wanted to share some of that information with you. And most of this you've seen before. We've talked about a structural deficit that we have looking forward. We are balanced through FY12 and working very hard on balancing in FY13 and getting very close. But even accomplishing that task, you can see that FY14, 15, 16, and it just continues beyond, is a structural deficit. We've listed there the assumptions to arrive at those numbers based on best information that we have. Just to look back quickly, what have we been doing? What have you been doing? $95 million in reductions. It's putting some of the information that we've provided to you kind of in bits and pieces into one place. $95 million is a lot of money, and if you think that that's all in our general road use tax fund of about $160 million, obviously those numbers aren't going to work, that you didn't cut your budget directly there by 70 or 80%. But about $27 million, you'll see there listed on the left, are the actions that you've taken that are savings annually About 24 of that is on the expense side. There's 2 or 3 million that are related to revenue reallocations, but we've had to reduce staff. We've looked at contracting out. We've reduced the budgets in contracts and supplies and travel. We've looked at privatization. We've reviewed health insurance plans. Those are all operating actions that impact our operating budget. We've also done several debt refundings or refinancings that have generated $13 million in net present value savings. That helps us to reduce our debt service levy, that allows us to increase levies elsewhere to assist us in our operations without raising the overall levy. And related to that, again, in impacting the debt levy, was we've reduced our capital financing of GO bonds. You may remember about 5 years ago, we were projecting a debt service levy breaching $5. We will most likely be under $4 for the budget that will come to you in the next month.
What's the time period for this, Alan? The
January
95 million.
1st, 2006.
So about a 4 to 5 year period?
4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And all of this with no tax rate increase. So we're still at 1657. This is just a graphic presentation. The black line is where we are today. The red line is where we would have been had none of those actions taken place. Obviously, we would never have adopted a budget at $186 million because you would have been in a deficit position. But it does show you the magnitude of the actions that you've taken. One of the things that you may have been reading about in the paper is some proposals at the state as it relates to implementing some sort of commercial rollback, similar to the residential rollback. Just to provide you some statistics here, the most recent information that we have, about 53% of the city's taxable value is associated with commercial. That's not assessed value, but that's taxable value. 93% of the city's valuation in TIF districts is commercial. That's not surprising. 60% rollback, and that should really be understood as a rollback to set values at 60% of assessed value impacts the city to the tune of $26 million. And if you were to try to make that $26 million up by raising your tax rate, the tax rate would have to go up 27%. And then just some other things for you to remember as you are hearing discussions about this. It has extremely complex consequences. We have tax increment grant agreements in place. We have bond commitments that are to be funded with tax increment valuations.
Would those be grandfathered in? For example, say a nationwide allied where we've got a pretty significant TIF arrangement with, would that be grandfathered in, or how would?
I think that's part of the title of extremely complex consequences. We want to be sure that we're at the table.
Depends on the legislation, Chris, I think.
Being able to understand and to have the legislators understand what the potential impact of any decision that they make is to protect us from that.
In the worst case scenario, keep in mind with TIF, you've got outstanding debt that you've issued that is being retired with TIF revenues, and you have contracts, the ones that you just mentioned with Allied and Wellmark and others. Those obligations, certainly on the bonds and on the other, would continue on. And to the extent they continue on and you lose the TIF revenue, then those obligations have to be picked up someplace else. And if they have to be picked up out of the general fund, then you have sort of a secondary but extremely significant adverse impact on those revenues and expenses as well. And that's the reason we're talking about it here. It's an issue in this discussion about commercial rollback that people often overlook, and that's the impact on our TIF.
One other thing that I'd like to pick up on in this is there are constitutional limitations against the impairment of existing contracts that have made some proposals. I mean, we've been looking at this, Chris, for many years, and some proposals will not make it on that basis because they cannot be set up to breach existing contracts.
The analogy I like to make with touching valuations in local government finances, whether it's cities or school districts or the county, the analogy is that, you know, the trails of what impacts what are amazing sometimes, where what happens when you do something over here. Mm-hmm. It's almost like turning off the light switch and your kitchen faucet starts to run. I mean, they seem like they're completely unrelated, but somehow it happens. So we just need to be careful that we understand what all those relationships are and that we are able to communicate those to the policymakers. We have a concern, obviously, that it could affect our bond ratings as the rating agencies look at what happens to taxable valuations and what any possible solution may be provided as it relates to reduction in commercial taxable property. For cities across the state, this could have a huge impact on their tax levy caps. If they happen to be operating within their general fund 810 levy and the value goes down and they are not providing any other recourse, they can lose lots of money directly into their general fund. So it's not just a City of Des Moines issue. This will impact all local governments. In the past, we've heard of replacement revenue proposals. They're just not a guarantee on future legislatures that those would continue on forever. We've had some past experiences, and we've lost several $1 million over the course of time compared to where we were, say, 15 or 20 years ago. And there are other funding solutions or mechanisms or tactical ways to address high property taxes for commercial property owners. And our encouragement is let us be at the table, let us provide some input and provide some response to any of the proposals that they may be making. Another issue that's being raised, and the League of Iowa has taken a lead in this and has supplied information. These are to the 49 basically largest cities in Iowa, and that's related to our Chapter 411 pension contributions. This came from the actuary that is used by Municipal Fire and Police Retirement System of Iowa that projects out city contribution rates over the next, actually the charts go out for 20 plus years. I've just reported to you what was projected here for fiscal year 11 through fiscal 16. Fiscal 11, you'll see the 19.9 rate. That's what we're contributing today. The 24.76% rate was adopted by the board and will be the city contribution rate starting next fiscal year, next July 1st. And then you'll see the projections going out for 4 years beyond that. And then I've also provided for you information on total city dollars, the 49 cities, how much that would equate to in contributions to the system, and then the Des Moines impact as well.
Just to interrupt for a second here, this is an incredibly important slide. The information on here is critical to us, and it's really summarized in terms of the impact on the city in the far right column. This year we're looking at about $9 million in 411 pension costs, but you can see over the course of the 6 years that are displayed here, that amount more than doubles to over $20 million based on the current estimate. The formula, the method, or the amounts of funds that are paid here are not within your discretion. You simply pay the bill. It is entirely a matter of legislative action that controls these numbers. But these are terribly critical numbers for us, and combined with other impacts, it is a very significant issue for the city.
If you combine this with what we just talked about on the property tax issues, the $26 million plus it's huge.
Absolutely.
Major cities. This is in Des Moines.
Finally, one of the things that we wanted to make sure that legislators and the general public understands some of just what our financial outlook is and how the City Council has adopted in the past, and that is that you have and you will maintain a balanced budget. That's a policy that you've adopted and that we have followed year after year. And some of the things that that means in a balanced budget is that we don't anticipate and bank on one-time revenues, but that we utilize ongoing revenues to finance ongoing expenses. That's an excellent policy to follow. But that does mean that the council has and may reduce costs and services. It also means that the council may increase the property tax rate. And then finally, given those first two items, or those first two issues, and what our long-term projection is, we're always looking and wanting assistance to pursue alternative revenues. And that's also been a policy that the council has encouraged staff to pursue the last 2 or 3 years, and we continue to do so. Rick, if you had any comments on that?
Well, I think just a couple overall things that you can derive from the information in this presentation. The first thing is that the council has displayed just incredible fiscal discipline over the last 4 or 5 years. You've done a great job of modifying expenses. There clearly has been an impact on the services that we provide. It's stressed the organization. There's some areas where perhaps we've cut too much, but we have to go back and make adjustments on those things. But nonetheless, the essential services, by and large, are being met with the budget we have today. But you've done a great job with your fiscal discipline, and I think people need to know that. We've tried to summarize that thing here. The other thing, from a broader perspective, to say about the situation is that the fiscal difficulties that we have here in the city are, to a large extent, shared with the state of Iowa. The state of Iowa continues to have fiscal challenges, not because somebody did something good or bad. It is simply the fact of it at state level that they have extreme challenges as well. And what that means is it's not going to be easy for them to come back and do things that help the city with their own revenue. So the state has their own issues, and my fear is that there will be a tendency to want to push obligations from state back to city, and we're just going to have to be very watchful of that. If you look at that nationally, you see the same picture, probably worse in a lot of other states across the country, but in Iowa we have that issue as well. So as we go forward in this session, and probably in the sessions in the next few years, it's going to continue to be a very urgent situation. The state, to a large extent, will take action that will have profound effect on our ability to continue services, either by things that they do or don't do. And it's not because they're good or bad. They're struggling with their own financial situation. But we're going to have to be very diligent in monitoring all that. We've talked about some of the things here. The pension cost is extremely important to us. Health costs are important. But in terms of health cost, we're impacted to a large extent by the federal legislation, which is a little bit, at least for me, a bit of a black box in terms of what's going to happen. So we're going to have to monitor that very carefully as well. So we have big issues, just as we've had in the past, but that situation isn't abating in terms of the uncertainty and the risk going forward. But I will say, if you look back over the recent past, this council has done just, I think, a miraculous job of managing the situation with the decisions that you've made, which have really helped the city keep its head above water, pay the bills, keep the organization going. So kudos to all of you.
Anybody have any other questions of Alan? Alan, thank you again. Done good pre-holiday work, sir.
Thank you.
Let's open it up for public comment. Anyone in the audience have any comments? Come on, this is our last meeting of the year. I mean, somebody's got to have something. All right, seeing none, hopefully we'll see you all back here this evening. Thank you.